He felt as though he had just heard an A sound. Ainz thought it sort of sounded like it was from himself. A Death Knight and a Death Warrior, two undead beings, had suddenly died. The one to defeat them was also wearing an item from Yggdrasil, the powered suit. Ainz had felt that he had lost 2 contacts, though the feeling was not too strong, given how many connections he had at once, which was how he had come to learn that it was not an illusion. Silence filled the room. He felt the gaze of every floor guardian, perhaps the maids too, on him. Ainz was the mastermind of this siege, so it would not have been wrong to view this as Ainz's defeat. Though something unexpected had occurred, the puny force they had lost was sent there precisely because losing them would not have been a big deal. So Ainz wished that they would not act so tight and careful. However, given the current situation, if he were to tell them that it was fine to lose a battle, it would sound more like a sore loser's excuse. Hindsight is 20/20, after all. His belief that he does not belong here would surely intensify. Ainz decided to use his long-practiced acting skills, which of course, he had obtained by practicing in front of the mirror, while the ordinary maids were absent. As I expected. The situation was under control. Ainz displayed the same air of arrogance a mob boss quietly talking to themselves would have, as they enjoyed the fragrance of the red wine from their wine glass. The important part of this act was to not speak in a loud voice. A loud voice would be quite lame right now. The trick was to act as if he was just mumbling to himself. His acting, the result of hard research, led to a ripple of commotion that reverberated around the room. Ainz swallowed his non-existent saliva. Whether he had succeeded or not depended on Demiurge's response. I see. So that was why. What? Cockitis. While Ainz was panicking, Shaltia responded, yes, yes, yes. As both of her hands shot up. Though it appeared that she was hailing him, she was simply calling attention to herself. Shaltia smiled with pride as everyone's gazes fell upon her. I understood it too, Rinsu. Ainz Sama predicted that something like that would appear, Rinsu. That was why we sent such a weak force, am I correct, Rinsu? This felt different from usual. Was this a success or a failure? Ainz stole a glance at Demiurge, but he was just smiling mysteriously while nodding his head. As expected of the both of you. The two of them held their heads high upon receiving Demiurge's praise. Perhaps Demiurge had already arrived at this conclusion, but left it up to those two to answer first. Ainz breathed a sigh of relief. This appeared to be a success. Albedo continued on. Intel from Sebas, Demiurge and also our corroborators in the capital, mentioned how Red Drop was operating in the northern end of the kingdom. Because of that, Ainz Sama decided to deploy insufficient troops to lure them out. The number of troops struck the sweet spot of being easily defeatable by that guy, but at the same time enough to conquer the city without their help. Sasuga Ainz Sama. Like a huckfish. That was Red Drop. Could we trust that intel? What are the possibilities that it was a player? If he was in a powered suit from Yggdrasil, isn't the possibility that he was a player quite high? Could they be sure that it was Red Drop? If so, shouldn't that intel have reached him at some point or another? No, wait. It was absolutely more likely that Ainz had simply missed that piece of intel while he read through the documents. For that reason, Ainz pretended that all was according to plan with a burst of gentle laughter. Needless to say, he had practiced this laugh quite a few times too. I did not think that he would actually show up. I was quite shocked too. I thought that perhaps they were conserving their forces for the showdown at the capital. Ainz Sama can always think of situations we couldn't, said Aura as Mare mumbled, amazing to himself. The unadulterated gazes of reverence from those two dealt a massive blow to Ainz's now fragile as glass superego. It's not like that at all. But, he could never say those words. Ainz had never considered such a thing could happen. Though he was of the mindset that losing was fine and winning was good, it was for different reasons than what they were now thinking of. Ainz reminisced about the meeting between him, Sebas, and the others, the meeting that made Ainz take charge of this battle. What is it, Sebas? Is something wrong? Ainz had just returned to Nazarick, and in front of him was Sebas, who was supposed to be on standby in Irantal, so it was natural for him to ask. Ainz had no recollection of the contents of his last order to him, let alone of an order for him to come forth. Perhaps he was here of his own will, Ainz was fine with that too. Though Sebas was stationed at Irantal, he was still given considerable amounts of freedom. The right to return to Nazarick at any time was a given. However, if his goal was to meet with Ainz, he could have done so in Irantal. This must have been about something important and urgent. I'm terribly sorry, Ainz Sama. Would you be so kind as to spare some of your precious time, or rather, could I bother you for a while? Ainz felt as though there was something ominous hidden in Sebas' muddled choice of words. He ordered the ordinary maid closest to him, the one assigned to Ainz for the day, to leave them be. The maid, along with the other maid who was assigned to this room, gently lowered their heads and left the room. Ainz looked towards the 8 edge assassins on the ceiling. All of you, leave us be. The 8 edge assassins fell from the ceiling as if they were completely weightless and silently exited the room. If Ainz had ordered them to never speak of what was said in this room, they would probably follow that order to their deaths, but magic existed in this world that could lead someone to dominate their minds and extract information through those means. Needless to say, even though Ainz would never allow that to happen, it was still best to stay on their toes. Ainz-sama, I am eternally grateful. If Sebas was the one to order them to leave, it would be akin to him saying that he did not trust his colleagues, the ordinary maids. So, his gratitude was probably directed at Ainz's consideration to not start any tensions between them. Ainz gently shook his head in response to what Sebas had said. To obtain the answer to the question he had in mind, Ainz asked again. So, what's the matter? It does not seem like an ordinary matter. An emergency perhaps? Yes, ahem, no. I am not too sure if this counts as out of the ordinary or not. Someone wishes to converse with Ainz-sama in private. I was requested to ask for Ainz-sama's presence at their behest. So they wish for me to go to them. They couldn't come to my room. Given that Ainz was the supreme overlord of the great underground tomb of Nazarg, this was an uncommon request. This is not about that human, is it? No, it was not, swear. It was a guardian who had not received permission to leave their area. They knew that this would be disrespectful, but they still wished to trouble Ainz-sama for a while. Sebas looked towards Ainz with an apologetic expression. Ah, I see. Ainz understood. If it was an area guardian, then it all made sense. Of course, if he ordered them to come over they would most likely do so. Some NPCs might respond in the negative due to a previous order from Ainz's allies, who were their creators, and whom they referred to as the 41 Supreme Beings. Still, most would obey Ainz's order. There were also those who simply could not be allowed to leave. A good example of which would be one of the area guardians on the 7th floor, Gurren. Because of his passive aura, it would surely cause a lot of collateral damage just by moving to the 9th floor. Things like wool carpets catching fire would be fine, but if it were to cross paths with beings like the ordinary maids, they would surely take a lot of damage. If that was the case, it was better for Ainz to go to it than the other way around. Ainz had never liked petting on airs anyway. In addition, he did not have any tasks on hand that must be dealt with immediately. At least that was what Ainz thought. Understood. I will go to them. So, who am I looking for? It was Negrito-sama and Pistonia. Sebas was one to refer to everybody else with the honorific Sama, yet he did not do so with Pistonia. Was it because they were colleagues? It was those two. Ainz's expression became dejected, and he tried his best to hide that fact. Though Ainz's skeletal face could not show any expressions, it appeared as though a select few of the Guardians could actually cold read him. Albedo was one of them. As a side note, Demiurge would apparently always interpret his expression in weird ways. Was it on purpose? Ainz had thought that he had hidden his emotions well enough, but it seemed like Sebas could still pick up on a few hints that slipped out of his vocal mannerisms. Sebas' expression had become more and more apologetic as a result. Though I feel sorry for Sebas, but honestly, I don't want to go. Nothing good will come of this. He could confidently state that. Imagine if you were in an office and someone told you, the people from that other department are looking for you. They don't want to call you, but want you to go to them directly. 8 or 9 times out of 10 it would be about a hassle. That said, it was not as though Ainz had a choice in this matter. If a larger issue rose up because he had neglected the smaller issues, the responsibility for the consequences would ultimately fall upon him. While it was true that Ainz was the absolute overlord of Nazarg, for him to rest on his laurels would be moronic. Ainz wanted none of the NPCs to dislike him, but rather, he desired that they would adore him, just as he doted on them, as if they were his children. Let us proceed. As for my schedule. Ainz pulled out a notebook to check what he had scheduled for today. He was someone who would put off tasks that he found to be annoying, yet was also someone who would wish that said annoying affairs would be resolved as soon as possible. This time slot is fine, it's empty. Can we go there right now? Negrito and Pistonia. Though both of them were area guardians, with what Sebas had just stated, Ainz knew exactly where they were going. That was why he could still convey his intentions to Sebas even with these half questions. If we were to allow Pistonia to arrive there first, how about an hour later? That's fine. Looks like it would be inappropriate to bring Albedo and Demiurge along. Yes. Though it pains me to say this, they hoped that Ainz-sama would be going there alone. Ainz nodded his head. What about that all? I will ask Pistonia to take care of that matter, there should not be any problems. Good. An hour later then. Sebas, will you be going too? Yes. I had hoped that you would grant me permission to. Am I allowed to? Sebas lowered his head of white upon receiving Ainz's approval. An hour later, Ainz used the power of the ring to teleport to the frozen prison on the 5th floor. No one was accompanying him. He had told the ordinary maid assigned to him that he had important matters to attend to, and had ordered her to keep the secret and stay behind. At first she had protested by saying, I will pretend that I saw nothing at all. You could just ignore my presence entirely, so please take me along with you. While Ainz did find her suggestion to be trustworthy, she did appear to derive some form of fulfillment from being ignored. He had talked this over with her in the past, and her response was that for him to objectify them would have meant that they had accomplished their duty as maids to the utmost. They were apparently also actively seeking that kind of interaction. Then again, he had only asked one of them, so perhaps she was the only one. No, she had to be the only one with such a fetish. Even if it were an ordinary maid like her, to guarantee that he did not risk even a 1% probability that this could snowball into something bigger, Ainz steeled himself. I should do something that'll make her happier when I get back, maybe assign her to some bothersome and menial task, so that she'll be happy or whatever. Yeah, I don't get it at all. There were just too many people in Nazar could behave like this maid. That was why none of his long-term vacation and paid leave policies ever took off. If this persisted, Ainz's hopes and dreams were all doomed to fail. Ainz pushed open the fairy tale-esque chateau-style layered frozen doors. Just as before, a chilly breeze flowed out from within, but Ainz, as an undead with complete immunity to freezing temperatures, was not bothered by it anyway. Ainz walked alone through the gloomy corridors. Other than checking for holes in the ceiling as he walked, he strode non-stop to a door that stood as the centerpiece of a giant mural which spanned the entirety of the wall. Just as before, the plaster on select spots of the mural had already fallen off. It looked quite miserable. The door took a single push and silently slid open. The three occupants of the room stood up to greet Ainz. The owner of the room, Negrito. The dog-headed maid, Pistonia. And the last of the trio, Sebas. Welcome, Ainz-sama. With the room's owner, Negrito's invitation, Ainz approached the table at which they sat.